firing, took choke off. I was obviously flooding it a bit. Hi everyone, Angus Campbell here. Sunday the 24th of October 2021. So back in the garage at last. There's been a little bit of a hiatus recently because had another few health scares in the family, but that's all over and done with now, and hopefully that'll be it for this year because there's been too many, but all's well now and we're all getting on okay. So where are we? The last video that I did was on the A70, about 3 weeks or so ago now probably, where we were actually testing the oil pressure on that with the oil pressure gauge, which turned out okay. And the time before that we fired up the Fury for the first time. And today we're going to be back on the Fury. So just to recap on a couple of community posts that you may have seen in the meantime. The first is that one of the reasons for the slight lull recently is that I did attend a vintage weekend at Cadwell Park at the end of September, and I took the Fury and the SS and the A70 to that meeting to display, but also to hopefully undertake some further tests around the private grounds of Cadwell. And that didn't work out too well really, because as you saw on the A70 we had some more head gasket problems linked to cylinder head nuts, the external cylinder head nuts, which has now been corrected as in the last video. But also with the Fury, we did attempt to run there and came up with some issues. So we're going to look into the Fury SS issues today and hopefully resolve those and undertake another test run. And this is obviously all in preparation for hopefully in the near future getting it on the road for a little bit of a road test too. Just before we get into that then, just to say thank you for recent comments, all very interesting, thank you. Some with technical suggestions, etc. Always gratefully received. And also thanks to those that participated in the community poll to provide suggestions as to which two of the bikes in my collection I should take to the forthcoming NEC Classic Motor Show on the 12th to the 14th of November at the NEC in Birmingham, where I'll be supporting the BSA Owners Club stand, and we'll be providing a couple of bikes for their exhibits. In pole position at the moment are the two latest restorations, I think, the Fury SS here and the Lightning A70, which I think is a good couple. But anyway, I'll keep the poll running for now, and barring any other external criteria which might actually impact upon the choice of which two to take, then we'll be taking those two. So anyway, less waffling, less babbling, and let's get on to getting back onto the Fury SS. So as you'll have seen in a recent community post, I took the Fury SS to a Cadwell meeting over the weekend to both show and to do a bit more shakedown testing. And we did have an initial successful static run where it fired up really well and was running well for a little while. But while we were warming up, it started to falter. It wasn't misfiring, but it was losing power, and then it petered out onto one cylinder, and then it slowly died. And upon trying to restart it, it was firing on one cylinder, but it was obviously retarded to hell. It wouldn't pick up, and only on one cylinder as well. So I think the issue is just simply that the timing has slipped, or the points heels have worn. Similar problem that we had on the Lightning initially. So we'll just go in the points cover. But coming into the garage tonight, the first thing we've got to do is it's sumped its oil and also peed it out everywhere, underneath the Lightning and all over the damn shop. But I found out where it's leaking from. So we knew it was sumping oil, but it's actually coming out from the underside of the stud and acorn nut, donut or whatever that holds this cover on, which is an extension of the stud for the stator plate. So it's coming out of there. The reason it does that on the Fury is because, like the Trident and Rocket 3, the primary chain case oil level is topped up by the main crankcase vestibule itself within the crank. So there's an oil a hole drilled through on the inside, and that's the same as the as the triples, which is why the oil level is rising as well when it's sumping in the chain case. So there's probably oil all over the place inside the engine. That's not a bad thing really, but at least we can tidy that up in the meantime. Let's get this bloody mess cleared up. But then what we'll do is, once we've done that, we'll get inside the points cover here, and I'm pretty sure all will be revealed. And I've got a good idea as well why the points may have slipped, because I think the whole back plate maybe has been pushed down slightly, which would then actually close the points gaps up, and I'm pretty sure that's what's happening. So anyway, let's get the mess cleared up first, and then we'll get in there and have a look. Right, that's got the oil mess on the floor cleared up. I think most of the oil has now seeped out of this, but let's just check that the primary chain case is empty, just in case we need to lean the bike over this end. So we'll just let any excess pee out of here. Okay, still a bit in there, but that's okay. As I say, the oil, the sumped oil, which was seeping into the primary chain case bus, because this level is topped up from the main crankcase, was leaking out of the bottom acorn nut, dome nut, whatever you want to call it here. Now that's normally obviously above the correct level, so we shouldn't have to seriously seal that, but we'll have a look at that to make sure that washer's correct, because I don't think actually the nut's seating down properly and holding that up properly, so I think the washer's not correct. So we'll check this out as well, and obviously that's 1/2 inch rather than 7/16. Right, she's still peeing away, so let's just have a look at this, and actually that's not very tight at all. So there's another issue. And yeah, that washer's too big. So it's not seating down properly within the sort of slight cutout, and it's trapped. That one's not very tight either. Same thing. The washer's too big on the outside diameter. Inside diameter's fine, but outside diameter is too wide. and as a result this bottom one has got a bit trapped, so we'll need to just lever that out slightly with a small screwdriver. You just watch that pin out there. Yeah, it's well trapped in there, but it's still not seated either. So that was a fail. That's my fault. Nearly there. There it goes. Just about. Took a bit of doing. There we go. That wasn't in there properly at all. Right, let's get that corrected and find a couple of washers. There you go. That's the one we need. That's the one we had. Same inside diameter, but it's just a slightly smaller outside diameter, so it'll actually fit into the machined recess in the actual case itself, which it wasn't doing. So therefore it felt tight, but it wasn't actually flat onto the case, and that's why it was leaking out so profusely there as well when it was sumping. Right, let's get those two on, and that's that job done. Right, that's the two dome nuts back on. They're seated much better, tightened up properly as well. So lesson learnt. Drain plug back in as it's we've now drained the excess. So let's get onto the main event and into the points to see what's going on there, because I'm pretty sure we're going to find that that's caused the issue with respect to the deterioration in the running. Right, as Musty would say, going in. As I say, I suspect that either the whole of the points back plate has actually shifted down because it is a sloppy fit, and therefore affecting the points gap, or alternatively the heels on the points have sort of squared up and has similarly affected the points gap. So I think on the points gap's been slowly closing up, and one worse than the other, hence it going onto one cylinder and then running, well, not being able to restart on one cylinder even though it was firing. Yeah, I think I can, sorry, that's glaring a bit. I think I can see what's happened. So let me try and explain this. The points main back plate is obviously held on by the two pillar bolts in slots, so you can obviously roughly time up with the main back plate, but then each set of points is on its own sort of secondary, or what I call a slave back plate, so that you can move each set of points individually to time up on the main back plate. But the main back plate is a sloppy fit. So firstly, these slots aren't designed to be tight, but you can see that there's a gap all the way around, except down at the bottom here, which I don't think you can see too well. There should be a gap down there, and there isn't. So I think that the whole back plate has slipped down very slightly, and because the points are activated on the lower side of the cam, then effectively these two sets of points have gone down very slightly, only by a few thou, thus closing the gap. Although actually now, to be honest, the points are both open at the minute, and there's a massive gap. Maybe I'm mistaken then about this back plate. Well, first of all, we'll check that it's tight on its two pillar bolts, which I'm sure it is. Maybe I'll go back to the last video just to check where I positioned that plate. I may have positioned it to sit on the bottom there so it couldn't push down. I can't remember. But actually, just looking at the points gaps have opened up. Why would that be, though? You would expect points gaps to close, but why would they open? Maybe an initial test would be just to re-gap those and just see if she fires up. Not going to be too much harm in that. Obviously we need to put some oil in her first, which is no sweat. What we'll do first is, the battery is charged up, so let's just turn her over while we're watching on the starter motor and see what happens. Well, they definitely appear to be working, but the gap's too wide, and I don't know if you heard, but actually I think one of the pots was trying to fire. But that gap's definitely wrong. Let's re-gap that first, get some oil in the motor, and we'll do another quick test. And then if that doesn't work, we'll need to retime. So that's an initial plan. Okay, so I've reset the points. Put 4 pints of oil in, replenished with a bit of fuel, and it's doing the same thing actually. I didn't manage to capture it on film, but when you're spinning it over on the electric start, it's firing on both cylinders, but just doesn't have enough power to pick up. So I think the ignition timing has slipped. So we'll reset that with the static timing as we did before, and I'll film that. But in the meantime, I'm going to grab a cup of tea and I'll put the battery on charge as it's getting a bit low. We'll keep that well pumped up. But the good news again is that the oil pressure warning light is going out when the starter's spinning the motor. So that's good news. Right, I'll bring you back shortly when we'll do yet another session of timing up with the static plunger, which I'm getting very good at between this and the Lightning, I can assure you. Right, back on the Fury SS, actually a couple of nights later, because last night I was out, probably for the last ride of the season on the old Rocket 3, went over to the East Midlands branch of the BSA Owners Club at Sharnford. And there might be a little separate video on that with a bit of riding and maybe a bit of a quiz. But anyway, Tuesday evening now, so a couple of days later, back on the Fury. So we're going to time up. So plugs out, obviously points cover already off. Rotor cover off, so we can use that nut to rotate the motor carefully. And also down at the bottom, right down here, is I've removed that plug there so we can use the timing plunger on the crank. So you've seen all this before, but just to mention, look how much oil has come out of the sump, and there's still quite a bit in the tank that I put in there a couple of days ago, so that's not what I put into it. So that's going to be a problem, because there was obviously much more oil left in the sump after I just used the drain plug to drain the primary case, so that wouldn't help things at all. So it'll be the usual technique. So we'll be doing the left hand cylinder first. It's a 180 degree, so it is left right, ba-bum, ba-bum, left right. So we'll do left first, which should be this set of points because the cams run anti-clockwise. So that's going to be the black and white wire rather than the black and yellow. We're going to be using obviously the bulb, the timing bulb on the points. So the technique is left hand cylinder first, put this to top dead center after the inlet stroke, and then back it off slowly using the rotor until this plunger that goes into the timing plug locates into a slot in one of the webs of the crank. And then we're at the static timing position, and then we need the points to open, just open when the auto advance cam is on full advance. So in other words, when we move it, in this case, further anti-clock a few degrees, and that's when the points should just be opening. So it'll be interesting to see where we are with that. So and then we repeat that with the right hand cylinder, which is a bit easier because once we've done the left, we can then rotate the crank exactly 180 degrees, and that means the cam will have rotated 90 degrees round to the next set of points. So left hand cylinder first, and we'll see how far out that is. Right everyone, it appears to be advanced. So let's get the screwdriver in view, there we go. So those are the points for the right hand cylinder. I'm doing that one first because these points are fixed to the main back plate, and we need to time that first before we go on to the left hand cylinder, which is on a slave then, so you can move it independently. But the right one's fixed to the main back plate. So we need to adjust that first, and we're in the right position. The pin was inserted in the crank and the point's open, and that's without putting the auto advance cam on full advance. So it's quite well advanced, which I'm rather flummoxed about. But anyway, let's see if we can time it up. And if we're struggling with that, then I might just see if the cam chain's slackened off, because that might affect it. But anyway, let's try and time this up first on both cylinders. Still struggling here actually. The points are well advanced actually. I'm just wondering if the auto advance unit wasn't properly on the locating pin and it slipped. So I'm going to take the points back plate off, and I'm going to check that auto advance unit. Right, next day, because I was at this quite late last night. Where does the time go? So I think I've cracked it. Now, what I've done to sort of try and stabilise the points back plate in one position is I've refitted a sleeve that I think Bob made when he was doing some machining on some of the motor parts for me, and you can just see it going around the outside of the periphery of the points back plate, and I think that was to effectively, you know, locate the points back plate in the correct position against the centre line of the stud coming out of the cam, but also to make sure it stays in that location, because the slots the back plate is mounted on are a bit sloppery deliberately. So I think what was happening is the points back plate had moved probably down against obviously the force on the heels of the consistent force, pulsing force on the heels of the points themselves. And I think we've got it in a position now where I've been able to time up both cylinders correctly with the points in this position. That spacer has some eccentricity to it. So for instance, it's thicker there than it is right down the bottom there. In fact, in one place it's non-existent. So effectively, I think what Bob found when he machined this up to accept the cams is that centre was slightly offset from the centre of the circumference of the timing chamber. So I think that's done. While I was at it, the other thing that I wanted to check was that what we've got to think of with respect to this motor is, well, it's chain driven double overhead cam a la Honda's at the time. So actually, obviously, any slack in the cam chain is going to affect timing as well. Now, you'd normally hear it lashing around if there was play in it, but I took the opportunity to take the top cam box cover off, and it's absolutely fine. It's a good check actually. I'm pleased I've done it, because the good news is that all appears to be well in there. The chain is nicely tensioned. The other good news is that the chain is wet with oil, so oil circulating, and actually it's still dripping down here. There's a pool of oil that's gathered in this front corner, which is what you'd expect, and it's good clean engine oil. So that's actually good news as well. So what we'll do now is button it back up, make sure we've got oil in all the correct chambers, and we'll see if it fires up. And then if we do get it running, etc., what I might do as a final clip for this particular video is I'll put it on its main stand to try and get the rear wheel off the floor, and we'll see if we can test it through the gearbox. Because when I first built this up, I think manually I was able to go through the box, but since then I've been struggling actually to get it from second into third and the higher gears. I'm hoping, since we've been running it and I've got oil circulating properly around the gearbox, that things may loosen off a bit, but the motor is very tight, so we might have to do a bit of running first. But anyway, let's first button this all back up. So make sure the tab washer's tight on the rotor nut, put the rotor cover on, plugs in, and we'll leave the points cover off for now, but we'll certainly need to put the cam chain cover on, otherwise there's going to be oil all over the place. Right, that's it. Everything buttoned up except the points cover. One thing that I forgot to mention that we had to do as well was to put the timing plug back into the crankcase to seal that. There's plenty of oil in the tank, even though we've drained all that from the sump, so I'm hoping that's just wet sumping with it being stood rather than being a scavenge problem, but that's something we do need to check. Oil does return, but it's whether or not it's returning in the right quantities. But anyway, that's got to have had some, a big contribution to why the engine was struggling to start. So let's give it a test run first to make sure it fires up, and if it does, then we'll get it on its main stand, maybe on a bit of a block to get the rear wheel in the air, and we'll see if we can test it going through the gears. But let's give it a test fire up first. Right, fuel's on, everything tidied up. I've left the seat open so I can check the oil's returning if we get it running. So, primed the carbs, tickled, also known as, and right, ignition on, we'll give it a go. Choke on, battery should be charged, Something else I've forgotten. Got to put the wires back on the coils, and that's because, ignition off for a start. That's because when you're timing the points with a bulb, you've got to disconnect the points from both the condenser and the coil. Otherwise the bulb won't go out when the points are open. So it does help if those are reconnected when you want to start. Okay, that might be a bit better. Right, try again. Okay, well, it runs, that's better. It was tending to run on 1 with a static throttle, but as when you opened the throttle, then it chimed in. Might be just because it's cold. I'll give that another go on full choke. Okay, right, well, she's running again. Not so much smoke this time, but the engine is tight. It was built with a lot of oil, so and it's only run very briefly for, well, that's 4 times now. But anyway, pleased with that in general. I think we've got a bit of tuning to do on the carbs now, and also just for peace of mind, I might just recheck that timing. But anyway, what should we do next? Should we put it on the main stand? Give it a bit of a whirl with the gearbox? Yeah, go on, let's do it. I'll also check that it's got enough fuel as well. Both taps are open. We should be all right on that front. Right, let me turn you off, and I'll get it on its main stand, and if necessary on a block, so we get the rear wheel off the ground. Right, I think we're all set to go. So it's on its main stand, chocked up. But the thing to realise with the Fury and Bandit is that the main stand pivot fulcrum is all wrong, because when these bikes are on the main stand, they're very much heavier at the rear, so they sit on their rear wheel, not on the front. So that's why in this case I've got my trusty old car jack behind, chocking it up on the frame. It's all pretty secure, so the rear wheel is well off the ground. So we'll fire up and see if we can get the rear wheel spinning and go through the gearbox. What I forgot to mention in the last clip is that when it was running, it was returning oil to the tank, and it was doing it, spitting intermittently. So that implies that it is scavenging properly, but we do need to keep an eye on that. The reason why it's sumping all that oil is that it does have an anti-sumping valve like the triples, but like the triples they don't work very well, and what we'll need to check is that the small ball bearing is seating properly in its housing, because in all honesty I didn't check that, and it might be a case of us having to put a sort of drift in there and give that ball bearing, you know, a good whack on its seat, in the same way that you do with, if you like, the valves, the ball valves on a Triumph plunger oil pump. Right, I'll go the other side, as we'll want to change gear, and as you all know by now, it's left hand change. So let's give it a go. Ignition on. Okay, right, well, first gear's fine, but it won't quite click up into second gear, but I can feel it trying. It's just it's engaging the gear, but it just won't lock. So I've probably got the quadrant in slightly the wrong position, I think, maybe by one tooth. That's my initial feeling anyway. And also you'll notice that it is when you're on you know, a constant throttle, it is only on one cylinder, but when you rev it, the other one chimes in. So I need to check up as well the slide levels on the carbs. I thought they were fine, but it might be lifting one more than the other through the junction box. But anyway, she's a runner. She's very, very quiet, no noises, firing up well on the button. Got a bit of heat into her, which we want to settle in anyway. The smoking's calmed down an awful lot, as you'll have seen when comparing this last run to the first run. So yeah, quite a lot of positives. So she's a runner again, so that's good. So what we'll be doing in the next video on this is I'll film going through some of the checks. Now that might not be until after the NEC Classic Motor Show, because this is going to that. So once again, thanks to everybody that participated in the voting. So at the moment it'll be this Fury SS and the A70L Lightning. So what we'll need to do is obviously drain oils and everything out from this before we go to the show. But what I'll do in the meantime is we'll just gently take it off its stand. We'll get the points cover back on. I might do one or two little checks, for instance, with respect to the carbs. I can check the slide heights through the airbox, if you take the filter off the airbox, you can get your hand in there and push your fingers or other implements down just to make sure the slide heights are the same, and also to make sure that they're both lifting simultaneously, which is what we would need to do. I'm sure that's the case, because it wasn't misfiring at all. As soon as I opened the throttle, it was chiming straight in the second cylinder. So yeah, pretty good. Right, we'll leave it there, everybody. And once again, just to remind you that I'll be at the NEC Classic Motor Show. I will put out a community post before then. I say at the moment, pending any requests from the BSA Owners Club, then it'll be the Fury SS and the A70 Lightning. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. Thanks for your interest as always. Comments always welcome, and any subscriptions, likes, etc. And I'll see you all again soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye bye.